September 19, 1944. Hill 246 near Arracourt, France. 4 M18 Hellcat tank destroyers sat in predetermined positions, their crews silent, watching fog roll across the valley floor like a living thing. Lieutenant Edwin Leaper checked his watch. 0530 hours. Somewhere in that gray void, 15 tons of German steel were moving toward them, and every man on that hill knew the mathematics of what was coming. The Panther tank could kill them from 1,000 yards. The Hellcat could not penetrate Panther armor beyond 75. This was not a fight. This was an execution waiting to happen. The only question was whose. The M18 Hellcat was a joke among Allied tank crews. Too light, too fragile, a rolling coffin with a gun that could not do the job it was designed for. Crews called it the death trap, the tin can, the sacrifice. Its armor was so thin that heavy machine gun fire could penetrate it under the right circumstances. A direct hit from a Panther's 75mm gun would not just destroy the vehicle. It would vaporize it, turning steel and flesh into fragments scattered across 100 yards of French countryside. And yet there they sat, 4 of them, waiting for the fog to deliver an entire company of Panthers directly into their kill zone. The doctrine was simple in theory, suicidal in practice. The M18 was not designed to fight Panthers head-on. It was designed to exploit speed, terrain, and surprise to hit weak points that conventional tanks could not reach before the enemy knew what was happening. But Doctrine assumed clear visibility, room to maneuver, and commanders who understood how to use the Hellcat properly. None of those conditions existed on Hill 246. The fog had reduced visibility to less than 100 yards. The terrain was broken, limiting mobility. And the German 113th Panzer Brigade was not coming to them scattered and confused. They were advancing in formation, professional and methodical, expecting to sweep aside whatever American forces remained between them and their objective. Lieutenant Leaper had positioned his 4 Hellcats with obsessive precision. Each vehicle had overlapping fields of fire. Each had a covered withdrawal route. Each had been sighted to engage targets at ranges where the 76mm gun might, under perfect conditions, penetrate Panther armor. Might. The word hung in the cold morning air like a condemnation. Sergeant Stacy commanded the lead vehicle, positioned at the point where German scouts would most likely emerge from the fog. Sergeant Henry Hartman held the right flank, his position giving him enfilade shots if the enemy turned toward Stacy. The other 2 Hellcats covered the withdrawal routes and provided depth to the defensive line. It was textbook. It was also desperate. The 76mm gun mounted on the M18 was a weapon of precision and frustration. Against lighter German armor, against the sides and rear of medium tanks, it was lethal. Against a Panther from the front, it was nearly useless. The Panther's frontal armor was 80mm thick, sloped at 55 degrees, effectively increasing its resistance to 140mm. The American 76 could not penetrate that barrier at any practical combat range. The gun could not even reliably penetrate the turret front. The only weak points were the mantlet, the curved gun shield around the main gun, and the side armor, which was only 40mm thick. Hitting the mantlet required a deflection shot at close range, a round that struck at an angle that would send it downward into the thinner roof armor of the hull. Hitting the side armor required getting beside the Panther without being killed first. Both approaches were tactics of desperation, the kind of fighting that got crews killed in seconds. But desperation was all they had. The fog held its shape for another 20 minutes and then it moved. Not lifting, not clearing, but shifting in the way autumn fog does, thinning in some places while thickening in others, creating channels of visibility that opened and closed like wounds. Sergeant Stacy saw the Panther first. It materialized 75 yards away, moving slowly, its commander likely as blind as the Americans were. For 3 seconds, neither side reacted. For 3 seconds, time held its breath. Then Stacy gave the order, and his gunner fired. The first round struck low, hitting the Panther's track assembly. Metal shrieked. The track separated, wrapping around the drive sprocket like a severed limb. The Panther lurched, its momentum carrying it forward even as it lost power to the left side. The German crew would be scrambling now, trying to identify the threat, trying to bring their gun to bear. Stacy's loader was already slamming another round into the breech. The gunner adjusted, compensating for the slight elevation change as the Panther settled. The second shot hit the side armor at a perfect 90-degree angle, punching through 40 millimeters of steel as if it were not there. What happened inside the Panther was immediate and catastrophic. The round likely penetrated the ammunition storage or the fuel tanks. The explosion came 3 seconds later, not loud, not dramatic, just a flat crack followed by smoke pouring from every opening in the hull. The crew did not escape. They likely died before they understood what had killed them. The fog swallowed the burning Panther, but it had already given away the American position. German doctrine was predictable. When encountering resistance, suppress and flank. The Panthers would not charge blindly. They would use their superior armor to fix the Americans in place while other elements maneuvered to envelop them. Leaper watched the fog, knowing what was coming, unable to see it until it was almost too late. 2 more Panthers appeared simultaneously, one from the left, one from the right, both closer than the first had been. The electric turret traverse on the M18, one of its few genuine advantages, allowed Stacy's gunner to engage the left-hand target while Hartman engaged the right. Both crews understood they would get 1 shot, maybe 2, before return fire made their positions untenable. Stacy's third kill came from a deflection shot on the Mantlet. The round struck the curved armor at an angle, deflecting downward exactly as Doctrine predicted, penetrating the thin roof armor above the driver's compartment. The Panther did not explode. It simply stopped, its crew likely dead or incapacitated from the round fragmenting inside the fighting compartment. Hartman's shot hit the side armor again, exploiting the Panthers' tactical mistake of turning to face Stacy's position, exposing their flanks to Hartman's firing line. The fog was helping them now, not through visibility but through confusion. The German commander could not coordinate his forces when he could not see them. Each Panther was fighting alone, engaging targets that appeared and disappeared in seconds, unable to mass fire or provide mutual support. But the Americans were not invincible, and the law of averages was not on their side. The fourth Panther to emerge from the fog fired blind into the area where muzzle flashes had been visible seconds earlier. The round missed Stacy's Hellcat by less than 2 yards, striking the ground and sending fragments of stone and metal into the thin armor of the lower hull. The impact did not penetrate, but it did not need to. The concussion was enough. The Hellcat's engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Stacy made the only decision he could. He ordered the crew to abandon the vehicle and withdraw on foot to the rally point. 1 Hellcat down, 3 operational. The odds had just gotten worse. The engagement was 12 minutes old. By all conventional military logic, the Americans should have been overrun already. 4 tank destroyers, now 3, against a brigade-strength formation of Panthers. The Germans had numbers, armor, firepower, and experience. What they did not have was visibility, and what they could not understand was how the Americans kept killing them. The fog was chaos, but it was shared chaos, and the Hellcats were exploiting it with a precision that bordered on recklessness. Each crew knew their sector, knew their withdrawal routes, knew the exact ranges where their gun became effective. They were fighting the battle their doctrine had promised: hit and run, fire and displace, never presenting a static target, never allowing the Germans to coordinate their overwhelming advantage in direct firepower. Sergeant Hartman's crew killed 2 more Panthers in the next 15 minutes. One died to a side shot as it attempted to flank what the Germans believed was Stacy's abandoned position. The second died to another Mantlet deflection, the round angling down into the crew compartment, killing the gunner and loader instantly and wounding the commander. The surviving crew abandoned the vehicle. Hartman did not fire on them. There was no point. Infantrymen without armor were not his concern. His concern was the next Panther, and the one after that, and the one after that, because they kept coming. The German commander, whoever he was, had committed to the attack, and German doctrine did not allow for easy withdrawal once battle was joined. They would push through, or they would die trying. By 0700 hours, the tactical situation had evolved into something unprecedented. The Americans had destroyed at least 9 Panthers and damaged several others. 1 Hellcat was disabled. 2 remained in the fight, moving between firing positions with a speed that the heavier Panthers could not match. The fog was beginning to lift, not clearing entirely but thinning enough that visibility extended to 200 yards in some places. This was a problem. Greater visibility favored the Panthers, whose superior armor and gun range would allow them to engage the Hellcats before the Americans could close to effective firing distance. But greater visibility also meant the German commander could finally see what he was facing. 2 tank destroyers. 2. The psychological impact of that realization must have been profound. A brigade of Panthers, some of the finest tanks Germany had produced, had been mauled by 2 American tank destroyers that weighed less than half what a Panther weighed, and possessed armor that could not stop anything larger than a rifle-caliber round. The German response was predictable and professional. They consolidated their remaining forces, pulled back damaged vehicles, and prepared for a coordinated assault that would use their numerical superiority to overwhelm the American position. But coordination takes time, and time was something the Germans did not have. The fog continued to thin. By 0800 hours, visibility had improved enough that Hartman could see 3 Panthers moving in formation, attempting to execute a textbook flanking maneuver. He also saw something else. The lead Panthers commander was exposed in his cupola, scanning the terrain, trying to locate the American positions. That kind of target was rare. Hartman's gunner put a round through the commander's position before the man could react. The Panther did not stop immediately, but it slowed, its movement becoming erratic as the crew inside tried to understand what had just happened to their commander. The second round hit the side armor. The Panther burned. 11 Panthers destroyed, possibly 12. The Americans had lost count. The battlefield was a maze of burning hulks and disabled vehicles, some still smoking, some already cold. The Germans had achieved nothing. They had not broken through the American line. They had not even forced the Hellcats to withdraw from Hill 246. What they had done was lose a substantial portion of their brigade's combat power to a handful of tank destroyers that should not have been able to stop them. The psychological impact on the surviving German crews must have been devastating. Panthers were supposed to be invincible. They were supposed to shrug off American tank fire and close to ranges where they could engage with impunity. Instead, they were dying in the fog, killed by an enemy they could barely see, using tactics that did not fit any conventional understanding of how tank warfare was supposed to work. By 0830 hours, the fog had thinned enough for both sides to see clearly for the first time since the battle began. The sight that greeted the German commander must have been sobering. Burning Panthers scattered across the approach to Hill 246. Disabled vehicles blocking the advance routes. Surviving crews withdrawing on foot or attempting to recover damaged tanks under fire. And on the hill itself, 2 M18 Hellcats, still operational, still moving, still waiting for the next target. The German commander made the decision to commit his reserve, bringing forward additional Panthers in one final push to break the American position. It was a sound tactical decision under the circumstances. He had already lost too many vehicles to withdraw without achieving something. The reputation of the 113th Panzer Brigade was at stake. The operational objectives that had brought them to this God-forsaken hill in France were at stake. He could not afford to lose to 2 tank destroyers. The final phase of the engagement began at approximately 0845 hours. 5 Panthers, moving in a tight formation, advanced on Hartman's position with the clear intention of overwhelming him through concentrated fire. Hartman's crew understood what was happening. They understood the odds. They also understood that Doctrine gave them one option: fire, displace, fire again. Never stay static. Never give the enemy time to range you properly. Hartman fired, striking the lead Panther in the Mantlet, the round deflecting perfectly, punching through the roof armor, killing the driver and bow gunner. The Panther slewed to the right, blocking the advance of the vehicle behind it. Hartman's loader had another round in the breech in 4 seconds. The gunner was already tracking the second target. The second shot missed. The third shot hit the side of the second Panther as it attempted to maneuver around the lead vehicle. The explosion was immediate. The ammunition inside cooked off, turning the Panther into a funeral pyre for its crew. 13 Panthers destroyed, possibly 14. The Americans had stopped counting accurately. They were operating on instinct now, on training so deeply ingrained that conscious thought was no longer necessary. Load, aim, fire, displace. Load, aim, fire, displace. The rhythm of it was hypnotic, mechanical, the kind of repetitive action that keeps men alive when their minds would otherwise freeze under the pressure of imminent death. The German advance faltered. Not broke, but faltered. The Panthers that remained operational were pulling back, not in panic but in good order. A tactical withdrawal executed by professionals who understood they had lost the engagement and saw no point in losing more vehicles to prove it. Sergeant Henry Hartman's crew destroyed the 15th Panther at approximately 0850 hours. The target was a command variant, identified by the additional antennas, and the commander's attempt to coordinate the withdrawal. Hartman's gunner placed a round through the Mantlet at a range of 90 yards. The deflection was textbook perfect, the round angling down into the crew compartment, killing everyone inside instantly. The Panther coasted to a stop, its engine still running, its main gun traversing slowly as electrical systems failed and hydraulics bled out. It was a ghost vehicle, dead but not yet aware of it, a fitting symbol for the entire engagement. By 0900 hours, the battle was over. The German 113th Panzer Brigade had withdrawn, leaving behind 15 destroyed Panthers, several damaged vehicles that would require extensive repair, and an unknown number of dead and wounded crew members. Lieutenant Edwin Leaper's 4 M18 Hellcats had held Hill 246. 1 vehicle had been disabled by near-miss damage. 3 had survived operational. Not 1 American crewman had been killed. The statistical improbability of that outcome was staggering. The tactical implications were even more significant. American doctrine had been vindicated in the most brutal way possible. Speed, maneuver, and precision could defeat heavier armor when employed by crews who understood how to fight from disadvantageous positions. The engagement transformed the M18 Hellcat from a joke into a legend. News of the battle spread through American armored units with the speed of wildfire. Tank destroyer crews who had cursed the Hellcat's thin armor and limited gun power suddenly understood what the designers had intended. The vehicle was not meant to trade shots with Panthers at long range. It was meant to exploit terrain, use speed to dictate engagement ranges, and hit weak points before the enemy could respond. It was a weapon of asymmetric warfare, designed for crews willing to accept risk in exchange for lethality. The Germans had learned this lesson at Arracourt. 15 Panthers destroyed by 4 tank destroyers. The ratio was obscene. It was also undeniable. But recognition came too late to save the M18 program. Even as crews at Arracourt were proving the Hellcats' value, production decisions made months earlier were coming into effect. The United States Army had already committed to heavier tank destroyers, vehicles with thicker armor and more powerful guns, designs that reflected a conventional understanding of armored warfare. The M36 Jackson, with its 90mm gun and improved armor protection, was entering production. The M18 was being phased out. By late 1944, Hellcat production had ended entirely. The vehicle that had just achieved one of the most lopsided kill ratios in armored warfare history was being retired in favor of designs that could not match its mobility or its tactical flexibility. The irony was not lost on the crews who had fought at Arracourt. They had proven that the Hellcat could defeat Panthers when used correctly. They had demonstrated that speed and maneuver were force multipliers that compensated for inadequate armor. They had validated a doctrine that most armored commanders had dismissed as suicidal, and their reward was to watch the vehicle that had saved their lives be declared obsolete and withdrawn from production. Military bureaucracy moved slowly, and by the time reports from Arracourt reached decision-makers in Washington, the production lines had already shifted to other vehicles. The opportunity to mass-produce the M18 and reshape American tank destroyer doctrine had passed. The statistical legacy of the M18 Hellcat at Arracourt was extraordinary. Over the course of the battle, American tank destroyer units achieved a kill-to-loss ratio of approximately 10-1. 10 German tanks destroyed for every American tank destroyer lost. That ratio was unprecedented in armored warfare. It suggested that asymmetric tactics, properly employed, could overcome significant disadvantages in armor and firepower. It suggested that speed and maneuverability were more valuable than conventional wisdom acknowledged. It suggested that lighter, faster vehicles had a place on the modern battlefield, even against opponents equipped with superior heavy armor. But statistics do not capture the human dimension of what happened on Hill 246. They do not capture the fear in the moments before the first Panther emerged from the fog. They do not capture the adrenaline spike when the first round left the gun, not knowing if it would penetrate, not knowing if the return fire would arrive before the Hellcat could displace. They do not capture the exhaustion of fighting for 46 minutes in near-zero visibility, making split-second decisions that meant life or death, not just for the crew, but for every American soldier depending on that hill to hold. They do not capture the weight of watching a vehicle burn, knowing that men were dying inside it, knowing that you had killed them, knowing that hesitation would have meant your own death instead. Lieutenant Edwin Leaper wrote in his after-action report that the engagement succeeded because his crews had absolute faith in their training and in the M18's capabilities. He wrote that the fog had been both enemy and ally, creating confusion that allowed inferior numbers to defeat superior forces. He wrote that the German tactical doctrine, which emphasized frontal assault and overwhelming firepower, had been insufficient against an enemy willing to exploit terrain and speed. He wrote that luck had played a role, that several near misses could have been direct hits, that the Germans could have broken through if they had committed their full strength instead of feeding vehicles piecemeal into the American kill zone. But he also wrote that luck favors preparation, and his crews had been prepared for exactly this kind of fight. They had trained for it. They had rehearsed it. They had accepted the risks inherent in crewing a vehicle that traded armor for speed. And when the moment came, they had executed their doctrine with a precision that turned statistical improbability into tactical reality. The Battle of Hill 246 was not the largest armored engagement of the Second World War. It was not even the largest engagement during the Battle of Arracourt, but it was significant because it demonstrated a principle that military theorists had argued over for decades. Mobility can defeat armor. Speed can defeat firepower. A smaller, lighter, faster vehicle, crewed by men who understand how to exploit its advantages, can defeat a larger, heavier, slower vehicle crewed by men who assume their armor makes them invincible. The Panther was one of the finest tanks of the war. The M18 Hellcat should not have been able to stop it. But on September 19, 1944, under conditions that favored neither side, American tank destroyer crews proved that conventional wisdom was wrong. They proved that doctrine matters more than hardware. They proved that training and tactics can overcome material disadvantages. They proved that the will to fight, when combined with the skill to fight effectively, can achieve results that appear impossible on paper. The men who fought on Hill 246 did not think of themselves as heroes. They thought of themselves as survivors. They had done their job, held their ground, killed the enemy, and lived to see the next sunrise. In the arithmetic of war, that was enough. In the ledger of history, it was everything. The Panther would be remembered as one of the great tanks of the Second World War. The M18 Hellcat would be remembered as the vehicle that should not have worked but did, the weapon that achieved an impossible victory because the men who crewed it refused to accept impossibility as an answer. 15 Panthers destroyed, 1 Hellcat disabled, 3 still operational when the Germans withdrew. The numbers told the story better than any narrative could. They told a story of courage, competence, and the brutal efficiency of men who had learned to fight without the comfort of superior equipment or overwhelming numbers. The fog lifted fully by mid-morning on September 19th, revealing a battlefield transformed by violence. 15 blackened hulks marked where Panthers had died. Scattered equipment, abandoned weapons, and the detritus of mechanized combat littered the approaches to Hill 246. The Germans did not return. The 113th Panzer Brigade had been mauled badly enough that it withdrew from the immediate area to refit and recover. The American lines held. The operational objectives the Germans had sought remained out of reach, and 4 M18 Hellcats, 1 disabled, 3 operational, sat on the hill that had become their proving ground. The crews did not celebrate. They checked their ammunition, performed maintenance on their vehicles, ate cold rations, and waited for the next engagement. Because in war, victory is temporary, and the next fight is always coming. The legacy of Arracourt would echo through the remaining months of the war. Tank destroyer crews who had doubted the M18 suddenly wanted to crew it. Commanders who had dismissed hit-and-run tactics as insufficiently aggressive began incorporating them into operational planning. Training programs shifted emphasis from frontal engagement to maneuver warfare. The lessons learned on Hill 246 became doctrine, codified in field manuals, and taught to replacement crews arriving from the United States. But the vehicle that had proven those lessons was already being phased out, a victim of decisions made before its value was understood. The M18 Hellcat would serve through the end of the war, would achieve kill ratios that no other American armored vehicle could match, would earn the respect of the men who crewed it and the fear of the men who faced it. But it would not be built in the numbers necessary to reshape American armored doctrine permanently. It would remain a footnote, an anomaly, a weapon that worked brilliantly in the hands of skilled crews, but never received the institutional support necessary to become the standard rather than the exception. History remembers the Panther as a masterpiece of German engineering, a tank that combined mobility, firepower, and armor in proportions that made it one of the most feared vehicles on the battlefield. History should also remember the M18 Hellcat, not because it was the best tank destroyer of the war, but because it proved that best is a relative term. In the hands of crews who understood its strengths and accepted its weaknesses, the Hellcat was more than adequate. It was lethal. It was survivable. It was the weapon that turned Doctrine into victory on a fog-shrouded hill in France, where 4 tank destroyers held the line against a brigade of Panthers and emerged victorious against every reasonable expectation. That is not a footnote. That is a testament to what happens when training, courage, and doctrine align perfectly in the crucible of combat. That is the story of Hill 246, September 19, 1944, when the impossible became reality because a handful of men refused to believe they were supposed to lose. If this story resonates with you, if you found yourself holding your breath during those 46 minutes of fog and fire, then take a moment to subscribe. Hit that like button and leave a comment below. Do you think the M18 Hellcat was underrated by history? Could speed and maneuver truly defeat superior armor, or was Arracourt a fluke, a perfect storm of conditions that could never be replicated? What would modern warfare look like if military doctrine had embraced the lessons of Hill 246 instead of abandoning the vehicle that taught them? The conversation continues in the comments, and your perspective matters.